A young bull rider is thrown from his bull with just a few seconds on the clock, but it isn't the fall that proves deadly. Hit like and subscribe. This is Fierce. Mason Lowe was a bull rider. He was about as ambitious as they came, and at the age of just 3, he was climbing on top of dairy calves and holding on for dear life as they bucked around the pens on his family's dairy farm. He grew up in Exeter, Missouri, surrounded by bull riding and rodeos. While most enthusiastic youngsters aim to compete for their high schools, Mason took a different route to stardom. He skipped the high school rodeos and instead opted to compete in the amateur championships throughout the Midwest from the age of 15. He believed that this form of competition gave him the all-important experience needed to become successful at the professional level. Mason received his professional bull rider's card as soon as he turned 18 and began competing in 2015, where he made the World Finals and earned a staggering $102,000. The start of his career got off to a rocky start. He was considered one of the up-and-coming talents of the new season, but then he was plagued by a wrist injury and then a leg injury. But things started to look up once more. At the Iron Cowboy competition in Texas, he became only the second rider to successfully ride a bull called Smooth Operator. That success gave him a score of 90.75 out of a possible 100 and moved him to 9th in the world rankings. In the summer of 2018, Mason married his girlfriend, Abby Cooper, and they started their new lives together in Rocheport, Missouri. It seemed that Mason's career was now taking off, as well as his home life, but things were about to take a tragic turn. On January 15, 2019, Mason was competing in the Pro Bull Rider Velocity Tour event, which was being held in the Denver Coliseum as part of one of Colorado's stock shows. With a crowd capacity of more than 10,000, the rodeo promises entertainment for all. In front of a full-capacity crowd, Mason took his place in the chutes. The bull he was riding was called Hard Times. It was not one that Mason was familiar with, but he took it all in stride as he climbed on the back of the 1,400-pound, 635-kilogram animal. The finals were being held the next day, and Mason looked like a strong contender. He had competed well so far and was a bull rider that many had come to see. His name was now big in the world of professional bull riding. He was considered a decorated rider and loved the sport through and through. But this was tragically to be his last ride. As the gates opened and the bull took off, Mason held on firmly. The bull immediately veered off to the left. The crowd cheered as Mason was bucked and thrown about on top of the enormous animal. The seconds counted down. He only needed to stay on for 8, but at just 3.04 seconds, he was bucked from the animal and thrown into the dirt. He landed heavily on his back and somehow landed underneath the bull. He lay there for a few moments on his back underneath the enormous animal. Immediately, the clowns jumped in. Everyone was on their feet, leaning over the edges to see if Mason was okay. Although the fall hadn't injured him, he certainly wasn't out of danger yet. The bull was still in the ring, and it hovered just above where Mason lay. A few agonizing seconds passed, with the clowns unable to distract the animal and lure it away from the fallen rider. Then, as Mason began climbing to his feet, he had barely sat up off the ground when the bull kicked, and its back left hoof landed on top of Mason's chest. All 1,400 pounds of pure muscle came crashing down on top of Mason, and in that split second, the damage was done. There was no malintent from the bull. It likely hadn't even noticed Mason lying so close to its back feet. But it had trodden on the young rider, and with its full weight, it had caused catastrophic damage. The clowns finally managed to get the bull away from the gravely injured Mason and give him the distance he needed to get out of the ring. The crowd had fallen silent, and an eerie hush descended over the ring while everyone waited to see what would happen next. Mason was still lying on the ground, not moving. But then he bravely managed to climb to his feet. It looked like he was going to be okay. The crowd watched, their hearts in their mouths, truly believing that one of the greatest riders was going to walk out of the ring. But suddenly, Mason grabbed his chest and gasped. he staggered toward the gates before collapsing right by the exit. A stretcher was brought in, and the fans watched as Mason Lowe was loaded up and carried out of the arena. He was rushed off to the hospital. Those in the crowd took to their feet. They removed their hats and fell silent, each whispering prayers under their breath. Had they just witnessed the death of one of bull riding's most talented young stars? Mason was taken to Denver Health Medical Center. He had been wearing a protective vest. They are designed to disperse the weight of a hit and are most effective against being gored by bulls' horns. But when the full weight of a 1,400-pound animal comes crashing down, no vest is likely going to be strong enough to prevent catastrophic injuries. His heart had been crushed, causing massive damage, as well as damage to one of his heart valves and aorta. There was nothing that could be done to save the 25-year-old, and he died a short while later in the medical center. Many at the rodeo didn't hear of Mason's death until the next morning. It was finals day, and the rodeo began with a tribute to their fallen comrade. All the bull riders came out into the arena to show their respect to Mason. A collective prayer was said, candles were lit, and on the back screen, some highlights from Mason's career played for all to see. Although bull riders all know the dangers of their sport, none expects to die so young. The bull who trampled Mason, Hard Times, was kept on the circuit. When footage was reviewed, it was clear that the 5-year-old bull had not intentionally trampled Mason and seemed unaware of where the cowboy was laying. The owner of Hard Times, Shad Smith, was pleased that the bull was kept on the circuit. He had been saddened by Mason's death, as the two of them were friends, and Mason often stayed at his family's house. When Mason had found out that he would be riding his bull, he called Shad, and the two of them joked about it. But Shad said that as far as bulls go, Hard Times is in fact very placid. He just does what he is bred to do, but otherwise isn't considered an aggressive bull. He was a successful bull who had competed more than 30 times and was allowed back on the circuit 60 days after the incident. Mason will be remembered by all who knew him. He was from a small town and was fondly remembered by his former classmates as being a bit of a joker and a class clown. Children in the small town looked up to Mason. He was someone who made them believe that anything was possible. From his humble beginnings riding small dairy calves on the family farm to making it on the pro circuit, Mason gave hope to many. Lane Frost was an American professional rodeo cowboy. He became world champion in 1987, but at just 25 years old, something went horribly wrong. Something that would change the future of bull riding forever. Professional bull riding has been dubbed the most dangerous 8 seconds of sport in the world. The sport of riding an enraged bull without being bucked off started in Mexico and quickly spread northwards to Texan ranches and throughout the U.S. Lane had always been interested in bull riding from a young age. His father Clyde was a saddle bronc and bareback rider before him, notoriously being on the circuit when Lane was born. Some said that the rodeo was in Lane's blood. He was tough, and although he was just playing around, he was already learning the techniques of balancing on the backs of bucking animals and holding on for dear life. At the age of 10, Lane attended the Little Buckaroos Championship in Colorado. He was ready to take on a full day of challenges and secured first place in bareback riding, second in calf roping, and third in calf riding. His bull riding career was now cemented in his future. He had a hunger for more and a drive to follow in his father's footsteps. This was just the beginning. Lane went on to become high school champion in 1981 and national youth champion in 1982. Perhaps his proudest moment was taking on Red Rock, the unrideable bull. This bull had been ridden 309 times, all of them unsuccessfully. No one had managed to score on Red Rock across his 4-year career, and so he was retired. But there was talk that Lane could take on the untamed beast. The challenge was on, and in a series of 7 exhibition matches dubbed Challenge of the Champions, Red Rock was brought out of retirement for Lane. In 4 out of the 7 matches, Lane rode Red Rock to the 8-second whistle, a feat no man had ever achieved before. But despite being able to ride the most difficult bull previously on the circuit, Lane's demise was at the horns of another bull. In 1989, Lane was soaring, both inside the ring and out. He had married the love of his life, Kelly, and the two of them were performing as stunt doubles in a movie. He also helped to organize what is known as Bullnanza. In July, Lane decided to take some time off from his busy schedule to compete in the Cheyenne Frontier Days. Situated in Wyoming, it's considered one of the largest rodeos in the world. It attracts more than 200,000 visitors every year who enjoy 10 days of exhilarating action. It was a cool, rainy day on July 30th, 1989, and Lane was competing at Cheyenne Frontier Days. But there were things that were strange that day, things that didn't normally happen to Lane. First, they got in late from the Canada runs. Then Lane forgot his glove. As a bull rider, this key item is never forgotten. Maybe something was telling him not to ride that day. When he went over to climb onto the bull, the payphone behind him started ringing. "We better hurry, boys. That call will be for me," Lane said. Even to this day, Lane's mother has wondered who was on the other end of that phone. If Lane had answered the call, would the outcome of that final ride been different? Could delaying the start of his round by a few seconds have altered fate? Lane had already ridden 3 bulls successfully during the competition. Now he was riding a bull named Taking Care of Business, and he was doing well. The crowd cheered as he held on tight. His body was bucked and thrown about on top of the bull's back. It was just 8 seconds to glory, and this is what Lane did. This is what made him a champion. He had made the time. He had scored 85 points out of a possible 100, and all that was left to do was dismount the bull. No easy task, and often regarded as the most dangerous part of the whole sport. As he left off the bull, it bucked and he landed in some mud right behind the enraged beast. It suddenly turned around to face Lane, and in a split second, it lunged at him, stood on his chaps, and charged. Lane was knocked through the air, landing heavily on the ground. As the clowns jumped in to try and distract the bull, the animal didn't take any notice of them. It was fixated on Lane and ran at him again with its horns down. Lane could do nothing but brace himself as the bull towered over him. It then rammed one of its horns into Lane's side, immediately crushing ribs and severing an artery close to his heart. Lane gasped. The bull was ushered away, and Lane stood up momentarily and signaled for help before collapsing onto the ground. Dr. Skip Ross was the first responder on the scene. He knew Lane was gone. He knew there was nothing he could do. It was suspected that his heart had been punctured and he was unresponsive, but Dr. Ross tried for 90 minutes to revive the young bull rider. It was only when other medics stepped in and told him it was no use that Dr. Ross admitted defeat. News got out from the rodeo that a bull rider had been killed. It sent shockwaves through the rodeo community, but worried family members stuck at home had an agonizing wait to find out who had died. Back then, there were no mobile phones, which meant that details traveled slowly, and whilst many mothers, fathers, and siblings breathed a sigh of relief that evening when the information about their loved ones finally came through, for Lane's family, it was the worst news imaginable. Frost's friend and traveling partner, Cody Lambert, designed a protective vest for bull riders to wear after the tragic incident. Now all bull riders wear one, and doctors agree that Lane's life likely would have been spared had he been wearing such a vest at the time. The traditional cowboy hats are also fast being replaced by helmets. All high school bull riders are required to wear helmets, and many of them continue doing so into adulthood and on the pro circuit. If they learn to ride with them, balancing their bodies with the headgear on, then they can compete successfully at the professional level in a safer way as well. Lane posthumously finished third in the Cheyenne Frontier Days rodeo, in which he died. Had he lived, he would have made it to his 6th consecutive national finals rodeo, an exceptional achievement for any bull rider. The year after his death, Lane was inducted into the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame. Despite his short career, he was a role model for many young, aspiring bull riders. Now, although more than 30 years have passed since his death, his name still lives on. His family has done all they can to ensure that he is never forgotten. His parents tell his story at various Christian and youth groups. His nephew, Stetson Frost, is in charge of the Lane Frost brand, selling all sorts of merchandise. What started out as a hobby has now turned into a booming business, selling 50 varieties of hats, shirts, stickers, patches, and the Lane Frost Red Rock action figure.